The moment she smirked at Judge Caprio, the entire courtroom knew something was about to explode. It happened so fast, just a brief flick of her eyes upward. A shrug heavy with attitude, but it sliced through the quiet morning session like a spark landing in dry grass. People shifted in their seats. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh no," as the air tightened around them. It was supposed to be a simple arraignment, one more traffic case among dozens, yet somehow everyone understood this was different. Caprio had paused mid-sentence. Not dramatically, not angrily, just a small, measured silence that carried more weight than any raised voice ever could. The cameras perched in the corners seemed to zoom in, even though they didn't move, capturing the way his eyebrows lifted just enough to signal that he'd seen everything. He always did. That's the thing about a judge who built a lifetime on reading people. He didn't miss micro-expressions, especially the ones meant to disrespect. And then there was Hurt, the teenage girl who walked in with the kind of bravado that made you wonder who exactly she thought she was. Phone half hidden in her hoodie sleeve, headphones dangling, a confidence shaped more by online bravado than any real understanding of consequences. She carried herself as if the rules were optional, as if this courtroom was just another space to perform. But as the murmur spread and Caprio's silence deepened, something shifted. The stage was set, the tension rising, and everyone could feel it, but none of them, not even the girl herself, expected how fast the tables were about to turn. What made the moment instantly magnetic wasn't just the disrespect, it was who she directed it toward. Judge Frank Caprio wasn't some anonymous figure behind a wooden bench. To millions of immigrants, working families, and young people trying to build a life in a country that doesn't always feel fair, he symbolized something rare: power with humility, authority with compassion, justice with humanity. He was the person who listened when no one else did. The judge who understood that life could be messy and complicated, and that sometimes people needed grace more than punishment. So when a teenager swaggered into his courtroom and treated him like an inconvenience, the tension didn't just come from the attitude, it came from what her attitude represented. Because this wasn't only a story about a traffic ticket, it was a story about two Americas colliding in real time. On one side, a generation raised to question authority, to push back, to challenge every rule, even the ones meant to help them. On the other side, a man who had spent decades fighting for the idea that respect isn't about fear or hierarchy, but about recognizing the humanity in someone else. The courtroom became a symbolic battleground. Respect versus entitlement, accountability versus excuses, earned wisdom versus impulsive defiance, and the world was watching. A clip of her smirk had already leaked onto social media. Within minutes, comments poured in. Some called it hilarious. Others called it sad. Most simply asked one question: why would she do that to Caprio of all people? The video wasn't even a minute long, yet it had already sparked arguments on TikTok, Reddit, and Twitter. Teachers chimed in. Parents jumped on threads. Young people defended her. Older folks shook their heads. It became bigger than her, bigger than the courtroom, bigger than anything any of them realized, because the truth was simple. She hadn't just disrespected a judge. She had unintentionally challenged a national symbol of fairness and empathy. And in a moment when the country was already divided across age, identity, and values, this single courtroom encounter struck a nerve that went deeper than anyone expected. And that's why the stakes kept rising. Because what happens next doesn't just challenge Caprio, it challenges the very idea of what justice should look like. Before she ever walked into Caprio's courtroom, the signs had been their little warnings scattered throughout her life that she had learned to ignore. Teachers described her as bright but stubborn, a polite way of saying she picked which rules mattered and which didn't. Group projects turned into battles, because she refused to compromise. Curfews came and went without meaning. She wasn't malicious. She simply believed nothing truly serious would ever happen to her. Consequences were for other people, not for someone who could sweet-talk her way out of any situation or distract herself with a joke when things felt uncomfortable at school. If a teacher tried to correct her, she'd roll her eyes or mutter something under her breath. If a hall monitor asked for her pass, she'd say she lost it, fully expecting that excuse to work. and too often it did. Adults gave up on pushing her, and friends cheered her on. Her small rebellion skipping class, arguing with teachers, posting snarky videos, made her popular within her circle. They loved the energy, the defiance, the sense that she was untouchable. Every laugh and every "you're so bold" pushed her deeper into the belief that she could live life without ever facing a real boundary. Then came social media. It became the perfect amplifier for her bravado. She learned how to perform annoyance, how to turn every disappointment into content, how to laugh off every misstep. When she got a traffic ticket, her first CI filmed a video whining about it, shrugging at the camera as comments flooded in with lines like, "Tickets are a joke, and just go in and act confused. They'll let it slide." Hundreds of likes convinced her she had nothing to worry about. She believed that confidence, or at least the appearance of it, was enough to overpower any official process. But beneath that bravado lived contradictions she never quite understood. She wanted freedom, but recoiled from the responsibilities that made freedom meaningful. She demanded respect while giving none in return. She craved understanding, yet dismissed anyone who didn't immediately agree with her worldview. She thought she was mature enough to handle adult choices, but not mature enough to accept adult consequences. In her mind, the world should bend to her comfort level. Her friends reinforced this every step of the way. They hyped her up before the hearing, telling her that Caprio was just a TV judge, that the court didn't matter, that fines were negotiable if she acted annoyed enough. They reassured her she had nothing to fear, nothing to prepare for, nothing to reflect on. She walked into the courthouse convinced she was walking onto a stage where she'd deliver another performance for her online audience. But the moment she stepped into Caprio's courtroom, she walked into a collision course with reality. Long before he became a symbol of compassion in a world hungry for it. Frank Caprio was just a boy growing up in a small Providence neighborhood where every cracked sidewalk carried a story and every immigrant family carried a dream. His parents had arrived in America with little more than determination and an unshakable belief that dignity wasn't something you were born into, it was something you earned, step by step through the way you treated people. Their home was modest, but their values were expansive. Respect was not negotiable. Gratitude was practiced, not preached. And compassion wasn't a weakness. It was the backbone of their survival. At family dinners, his father would talk about the importance of listening before judging, of understanding circumstances before passing opinions. Those conversations shaped Frank's earliest sense of justice. When neighbors struggled, his family shared what they had. When someone stumbled, they helped them back up. In that small world of tight budgets and big hearts, he learned that people deserved patience, not punishment. When life pushed them into difficult corners, as he grew older, Frank carried these lessons into adulthood. His early legal career wasn't glamorous. While others sought prestigious firms and high-paying clients, he chose to defend people no one else would. The single parent who missed a court date because she worked double shifts, the young man overwhelmed by bills he didn't understand, the elderly immigrant who broke an ordinance simply because he couldn't read the posted signs. Frank didn't just represent them, he listened to them. And in listening, he discovered the stories behind the mistakes, the humanity behind the missteps. That understanding shaped the judge he eventually became. In a courtroom where many sought control through intimidation, Frank found power in calmness. He cultivated it like a discipline, refining it over decades. He learned that a raised voice closes doors, while a measured tone opens them. He understood that sometimes justice required firmness, but often it required mercy. And he knew that even when someone was wrong, treating them with dignity could change the direction of their life far more effectively than a harsh sentence ever could. His worldview stood in stark contrast to the teenage girl who had entered his courtroom with a smirk. She believed authority existed to be challenged for the sake of performance. He believed authority existed to protect the vulnerable and guide the lost. She confused defiance with strength. He understood that true strength was the ability to stay patient when provoked. She wanted respect handed to her unearned. He believed respect was the reward for how you treated the people around you. Every case for him was more than a procedural formality. It was an opportunity to show that fairness and empathy could coexist, that justice didn't need to be cold to be effective. But this moment, this particular encounter, carried deeper stakes. In her attitude, he saw something larger than teenage rebellion. He saw a reflection of a growing cultural fracture, a generation struggling to navigate identity. Pressure, frustration, and a world that often felt stacked against them. And he knew that if he responded with anger, he would only reinforce her belief that authority couldn't be trusted. But if he responded with dignity, he might teach her something she had never been taught at home, school, or online. This wasn't just another ticket. It was a test of everything Caprio stood for, and the test began the moment. She opened her mouth. The hearing began with the usual formality. Caprio reading the citation with his steady, unhurried cadence, but she didn't even let him finish. Before he could reach the second line, the girl cut in with a loud, dismissive, "Yeah, I already know what it says." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Caprio looked up slowly, not startled, but assessing. The way a seasoned teacher might examine a student who hasn't realized they've crossed a line. He tried again, giving her space to settle, but she spoke over him a second time. "It wasn't even my fault," she insisted, waving her hand like she was brushing away an annoying fly. The cop was being dramatic. Her voice carried a tone that mixed whining with performance, as though the courtroom existed purely for her audience, real or imagined. She leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, one foot tapping aggressively against the floor. Every movement radiated impatience. Caprio remained composed, though anyone who knew him well could detect the subtle changes, the slight tightening at the corner of his mouth, the deepened breath before each controlled response. He asked her a question meant to clarify the situation, but she rolled her eyes so hard, the gesture felt like a physical shove. "Why are we even going through this?" she said. "It's literally just a ticket. Can't you just, skip to the part where you let me go?" The courtroom fell silent. Even those waiting for their own cases lifted their heads, drawn in by the tension. You could practically hear the shift in energy, as if everyone collectively understood they were witnessing something they would later describe to their friends, families, their social feeds. Caprio, meanwhile, stayed rooted in calmness, his voice level, his questions patient. But the more composed he remained, the more irritated she became, as though his dignity was somehow an inconvenience to her performance. He explained why the charge mattered, but she gave a dramatic sigh. "This is such a waste of time." She said it not quietly, but loud enough to assert dominance, loud enough to show she believed the whole proceeding was beneath her. That was the moment the air changed again. Caprio lifted his eyes, looking at her fully now. It's not as a judge addressing a defendant, but as a man deciding whether it was time to teach a lesson she had spent years avoiding. The courtroom seemed to lean forward as one, and then, with one sentence, she pushed Caprio too far. For a long moment, after the girl's last sarcastic remark, the courtroom froze. You could almost hear the fluorescent lights humming. Judge Caprio leaned back ever so slightly, folding his hands as if he were deciding between mercy and surgery. His expression didn't harden, didn't flare with anger. Instead, it settled into something far more dangerous clarity. He spoke softly. "Young lady," he began, "I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen every kind of attitude walk through those doors." She smirked, as if ready for another round. But he continued before she could jump in. "I've seen people who made mistakes. I've seen people who owned them. I've seen people who tried to hide from them. But what I'm seeing from you?" He paused, letting the silence sink in, "is something else entirely." A ripple of murmurs moved through the gallery. The girl stiffened. Caprio leaned forward, elbows on the bench, voice still measured. "You seem to believe that responsibility is something that happens to other people, something that only applies when you feel like it." She opened her mouth, but he lifted a hand, calm, firm. "And that, young lady, is where your world and the real world begin to separate." The courtroom quieted to a pin drop. "You were given a law," he said. "The same law every other driver follows. You broke it. And instead of saying, 'Judge, I made a mistake,' you decided to talk over me, to talk through me, to talk past me." Her confidence began to flicker. Caprio took a breath. The kind of slow inhale that meant he was about to deliver something unforgettable. You know, he said, when I was your age, my father used to tell me something. He said, son, when you disrespect the rules, what you're really disrespecting is the people those rules protect. He let the words land. That stop sign you ignored? It's not just a red octagon on a pole. It's a promise. A promise to protect the kid crossing the street, the mother pushing a stroller, the older man walking his dog. You didn't just break a rule. He pointed gently toward her stack of citations. You broke that promise. A few audience members nodded. The bailiff shifted. Arms lightly crossed. Caprio wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. Now, he continued, I understand teenagers. I've raised some. I know how easy it is to believe the world revolves around your opinions, your schedule, your inconvenience. A small, sympathetic laugh passed through the room, but here's the truth you're going to have to face. Whether today or 10 years from now, the world is full of people who think respect is optional, and life has a funny way of reminding them that it's not. He paused again, letting the silence breathe. You interrupted me 3 times in under a minute. He counted on his fingers, slowly. You talked over the officer. You rolled your eyes at the charges, and you dismissed every fact that didn't fit the story you wanted to tell.
Ow!
Her smirk was gone now, in its place. Something new. Doubt. Caprio leaned back. But let me ask you something, young lady. If you're so confident in your story, why do you need to talk over everyone else to tell it? A loud whisper broke out in the back row. She swallowed hard. You see, Caprio said, tone softening just slightly. There's a difference between confidence and entitlement. Confidence says, I respect myself. Entitlement says, only I matter. He clasped his hands, and I refuse to let you walk out of this courtroom believing the latter. For the first time, the girl's shoulders slumped. Caprio continued, a gentleness creeping into his words. I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to teach you. Because at your age, someone needs to. Someone has to tell you that responsibility isn't a punishment, it's a privilege. It means you're trusted. Trusted to drive. Trusted to make choices. Trusted to share the road with the rest of us. He leaned forward again, voice deeper now. But trust can be lost. And you're standing very close to losing it. The girl stared at the floor. Caprio softened, even more a deliberate shift. I don't believe you're a bad person. I don't believe you're hopeless. I believe you're young, and maybe no one ever explained how your actions ripple outward. How the attitude you bring into this room is the same attitude you bring into your life. A slow exhale escaped her lips. Now, he said, I could fine you heavily. I could suspend your license. I could do all of that, and I'd be within the law. He reached for the papers in front of him, but I'm not going to. Surprised instead, I'm giving you something your attitude desperately needs. He paused. A mirror. He slid a form toward the clerk. You will complete 20 hours of community service. Real service helping people who actually depend on the rules you treated like suggestions. Another slide of paper. You will attend a driving responsibility workshop. And you will write a letter not to me, not to the officer, but to the pedestrians in this city, telling them why their safety matters. Gasps rustled across the room, and lastly he said, You will return to this courtroom in 30 days and read that letter aloud, in front of everyone. Her mouth fell slightly open. This wasn't the punishment she expected. It was worse. It required humility. Caprio folded his hands one final time. You came into this courtroom with arrogance, he said. But you're leaving with something far more important. He let his words cut the air with surgical precision. In this courtroom, young lady, respect isn't optional. It's earned. The room was silent, absolutely still. Caprio tapped his gavel once soft. Controlled, final, case closed. But before anyone could stand, before the tension fully broke, a murmur rushed through the gallery. People leaned toward one another. Something was happening behind the scenes. Something no one expected. Caprio looked over the docket, eyebrows lifting, and that's when the real twist began. Cliffhanger. But the real shock came after the hearing. The clip hit the internet like a match in a dry forest. Within an hour of the hearing, someone in the gallery nobody knows who uploaded a 43-second snippet of Caprio's mic drop line. That one sentence, delivered with the weight of a lifetime of dignity, detonated across social media platforms. Like a controlled explosion, Twitter erupted first. Thousands of retweets in minutes. The clip pinned to the top of trending topics. Hashtag respect discerned, hashtag Caprio moment, #great reality check. People weren't just sharing it, they were dissecting it like a cultural event. One user wrote, "This man just delivered the greatest reality check of 2025. Another replied, "Can he run for president?" Asking for an entire generation. Memes flooded the timeline. Picture of the girl rolling her eyes when you realize you picked the wrong judge today. Picture of Caprio leaning forward, the look you get right before your soul leaves the chat. The algorithm was feasting then. TikTok got hold of it. That's when the real storm hit. Creators slowed down the moment Caprio pauses. Added dramatic musicons, Zimmer, violins, bass drops. Reaction videos piled up. Teachers, parents, comedians, law students, influencers. Some stitched their own expressions as the speech unfolded, mouths dropping open at the same point every time. Comments scrolled fast. "This is parenting. Judge Caprio is the hero we didn't know we needed. The girl aged 10 years during that silence. Somebody check on her ego." Within 12 hours, the clip hit 12 million views. By morning, 47 million. By the next day, every major news outlet had picked it up. Instagram Reels became a gallery of edited, highlight motion, black and white filters, inspirational quotes over Caprio's face. Teachers posted, "Every student needs to watch this." Parents wrote, "Showing this to my teen tonight. God bless this man." Even celebrities chimed in. A famous actor reposted the clip with the caption, "This is what leadership looks like." A best-selling author tweeted, "We've raised a generation allergic to accountability." Judge Caprio just gave the antidote. Then came the legal analysts. They broke it down frame by frame. Caprio's tone shift. The pivot from discipline to empathy. Why his sentencing was genius. The psychology behind humility-based justice. They treated the moment like it was a landmark case in emotional jurisprudence. One commentator said, "This wasn't just a ruling. It was a cultural correction." Another wrote, "Caprio's speech will be taught in law classes for years." Everyone agreed on one thing. Something about his delivery calm. Steady, almost fatherly hit. Society in a place that had been starving for guidance. The world had gotten loud, chaotic, argumentative, polarized. But this one momentan older judge reminding a teenager that consequences still exist brought people together. In a way politics hadn't in years. Caprio didn't lecture her with superiority. He didn't humiliate her. He didn't crush her spirit. He simply held up a mirror and asked her to look, and people saw themselves in that reflection. Some saw the teen, the arrogance they once carried. Some saw Caprio, patience they wished they had. Some saw society, hunger for moral clarity. For someone to finally say what everyone else was too afraid. 2. The clip became more than a viral moment. It became a symbol. The girl, once just a face in a courtroom, became the embodiment of youthful entitlement. Caprio became the embodiment of dignity, wisdom, and that nearly forgotten concept, accountability. And as the world debated, shared, reacted, and argued, one thing became clear. People weren't just watching a courtroom video. They were watching a cultural reset. But then, just when the internet thought it understood the whole story, just when the narrative seemed locked in place, something unexpected, something cliffhanger. And that's when the entire story flipped. By the time the courtroom emptied, the tension had shifted into reflection. The girl, once brimming with unchecked defiance, sat quietly in the chair where arrogance had moments before ruled. Her cheeks still flushed, but her gaze had softened. For the first time, She wasn't thinking about performance or social media likes. She was thinking about what she had done and what she had learned. She approached the bench, voice low but steady. "Judge Caprio," she said. And then paused, swallowing the words she hadn't said to anyone before. "I apologize. I crossed the line. I didn't respect you, and I didn't respect the rules. I see that now." The room held its breath as her words carried the weight of genuine recognition. This was more than a scripted apology. It was a moment of transformation, a realization that authority, fairness, and compassion weren't enemies, they were guides. Caprio nodded, the faintest smile, acknowledging the change. "Acknowledging a mistake," he said softly, "is not weakness. It's strength. And humility is not punishment. It's the doorway to growth." She nodded again, and the shift was tangible, almost cinematic, the arrogance evaporating, replaced by reflection. In the days and weeks that followed, she carried the lesson with her. She spoke to peers differently, paused before challenging authority, and approached challenges with a new understanding of responsibility. Her apology, once just a requirement, became a promise she intended to keep, to take accountability seriously, to respect others even when it was inconvenient, and to recognize that dignity is earned through actions, not assumed. For the audience who had witnessed the hearing, the lesson was broader and enduring. Respect isn't just obedience. Responsibility isn't just punishment. Leadership isn't loud. It is calm, measured, and moral. Caprio's courtroom had illustrated that America's tradition of fairness is not simply about laws, but about the courage to hold oneself and others accountable with compassion. Justice isn't just punishment. Sometimes, justice is the courage to tell the truth even when someone doesn't want to hear it. As the girl left the courtroom that day, there was a sense of resolution that rippled beyond her alone. In the quiet dignity of one man's measured words, a chaotic moment had transformed into a universal truth. And in that transformation, every viewer, every witness, every citizen could feel the emotional crescendo, the power of humility, the weight of integrity, and the enduring strength of character prevailing over arrogance. Teen girl disrespects Judge Caprio, instantly gets what she deserves. That title tells you what happened, but it only scratches the surface. This wasn't about punishment. It was about leadership. It was about dignity. It was about the quiet, unwavering strength that speaks louder than shouts, that holds firm when chaos threatens to take over. Judge Caprio didn't humiliate her. He didn't need to. He reminded her and all of us that respect, responsibility, and humility are lessons worth learning, no matter your age or circumstance. This story isn't just a courtroom drama. It's a mirror for our culture, a reflection of the values we hope to uphold. In a world where entitlement often overshadows empathy, where arrogance can masquerade as confidence, and where social media amplifies the loudest voices, Caprio's example reminds us that true authority comes from character, not volume. He showed that justice isn't merely about rules, it's about cultivating understanding, shaping behavior, and lifting people toward the best versions of themselves. If you believe dignity still matters, hit subscribe. Be part of a community that values integrity over spectacle, empathy over ego, and leadership that inspires rather than intimidates. Share this story to remind someone that respect is earned, not demanded, not assumed, but built through actions, through patience, and through moral courage. And remember, in Judge Caprio's courtroom, just like in life, character always speaks louder than attitude. Every smirk, every interruption, every moment of defiance can be met not with anger, but with clarity, calm, and the unwavering expectation that people rise to meet the best version of themselves. Because sometimes, the greatest lessons come not from punishment, but from the courage to show what true dignity looks like. And two, let it echo far beyond the walls of a courtroom,